Why are billionaires and politicians suddenly losing sleep over strikes, protests, and union drives? Across the globe, workers are rising up, refusing to stay silent while profits soar and paychecks stagnate. From warehouses to classrooms, from coffee shops to hospitals, ordinary people are challenging a system that has ignored them for far too long. This isn't just about wages, it's about dignity, power, and the future of work itself. Stay with us as we break down the 10 reasons workers are fighting back and why the elites are more scared than ever before. Number one, rising inequality. Over the past 4 decades, the gap between the wealthy elite and everyday workers has grown into a massive divide. This isn't just a statistic on a chart, it's a reality millions of families feel when they check their pay stubs and compare them to rising living costs. Imagine this: a top CEO in the United States can make more money in a single day than the average employee earns throughout the entire year. That kind of imbalance isn't just unfair, it feels like a betrayal to those who keep the economy running with their labor. Richard Wolff and many other economists argue that this widening inequality is not accidental, but rather the result of policies and structures designed to benefit those at the very top while keeping wages suppressed for the majority. Workers see it, they feel it, and now they're demanding change louder than ever before. The anger doesn't come out of thin air, it grows from real lived experiences. While corporate executives reward themselves with bonuses and stock buybacks, regular employees often work multiple jobs just to cover rent and groceries. That contrast creates a deep sense of frustration and resentment. Research shows that income inequality not only reduces financial stability, but also erodes trust in institutions and increases social unrest. When people realize the rules of the game are stacked against them, they stop playing along quietly. Strikes, protests, and walkouts become powerful tools to push back against a system that seems designed to keep them down. Workers today are not just frustrated about their paycheck, they are frustrated about being excluded from the prosperity they helped create. This fight back is what terrifies elites the most. It is no longer a quiet complaint whispered at the dinner table. It's a collective roar across industries and countries. Inequality has reached such visible extremes that even those who once ignored it can no longer deny its impact. Social media amplifies stories of unfair pay gaps, turning individual anger into collective awareness. Elites fear that this shared consciousness could spark stronger labor unions, new policies demanding wealth redistribution, and political movements challenging corporate dominance. Rising inequality is more than an economic issue. It's the spark that lights the fire of worker resistance, and it shows no signs of fading anytime soon. Number two, inflation and cost of living. One of the strongest forces pushing workers to fight back today is the crushing weight of inflation paired with stagnant wages. Prices for everyday essentials, rent, groceries, transportation, and healthcare have climbed to levels that many households can no longer afford. While a pay raise of a few cents an hour might look good on paper, it hardly makes a dent when rent has jumped hundreds of dollars in just a year, or when the cost of eggs, milk, and gas continues to climb month after month. Workers feel this squeeze in the most personal way possible: at the checkout counter, at the gas pump, and when bills pile up faster than paychecks. Economists point out that this mismatch between wages and rising costs isn't just frustrating. It creates a permanent state of financial stress that fuels discontent. People realize that if they don't push back now, they risk falling into a cycle of debt and struggle that may never end. This pressure is especially visible in industries where wages have barely budged despite soaring demand for labor. Teachers, nurses, delivery drivers, and grocery workers, professions society depends on every single day, are finding themselves priced out of the very communities they serve. When someone working full-time still cannot cover rent or childcare, the system clearly isn't working in their favor. That reality has led to waves of strikes and labor actions in sectors once seen as stable. Research from labor economists shows that financial insecurity has a direct link to collective action. When people see their quality of life eroding despite working harder than ever, they are far more likely to organize. Workers know that without demanding better compensation, the gap between what they earn and what they need to survive will only grow wider. What worries elites is the determination that comes from desperation. A person struggling to keep their family afloat has little to lose by standing up to their employer or even walking off the job. Inflation has stripped away the illusion of financial stability for millions, creating a shared frustration that crosses industries and regions. Social media feeds are filled with stories of workers calculating how many hours they must work just to afford basic necessities, and that visibility strengthens the sense of unity. The fight against high living costs is not only an economic battle, but also a moral one, as people demand dignity and security in exchange for their labor. Elites know that when basic survival is at stake, the movement for change becomes unstoppable. Number 3, corporate profits versus workers' struggles. Perhaps nothing highlights the growing frustration of workers more than the glaring contrast between record-breaking corporate profits and the financial struggles of employees. Over the past several years, major corporations have proudly announced quarterly earnings in the billions, while many of their workers continue to live paycheck to paycheck. This contradiction is impossible to ignore. How can companies afford stock buybacks, luxury bonuses, and expensive marketing campaigns, yet claim they cannot raise wages for the people who generate their wealth? Richard Wolff and other economic voices emphasize that this imbalance exposes the priorities of modern capitalism. Profits come first, while workers are treated as an afterthought. It's a bitter pill to swallow when employees see headlines about massive profits while they themselves are cutting corners just to afford groceries. The psychological impact of this disparity is just as powerful as the financial one. Workers feel exploited when they realize their hard work is directly tied to enormous profits that never seem to benefit them. Research on workplace motivation shows that when employees perceive unfair treatment, productivity and loyalty plummet. Instead of feeling pride in their company's success, workers feel anger, resentment, and betrayal. This anger often transforms into action, fueling strikes, walkouts, and unionization drives across different industries. For example, warehouse and delivery workers see the billions made during holiday sales, yet face exhausting shifts with little compensation. Healthcare employees watch hospitals rake in profits while struggling with understaffing and burnout. These stories resonate widely, turning individual frustration into collective solidarity. What terrifies elites is that this pattern of exploitation is becoming increasingly visible to the public. Social media platforms highlight workers sharing first-hand accounts of poor treatment alongside reports of soaring profits, making the contradiction impossible to hide. The more this imbalance is exposed, the harder it becomes for corporations to defend their practices without facing backlash. Workers are no longer just demanding fair pay, they are questioning why corporate wealth is hoarded at the top while communities struggle. This shift from quiet dissatisfaction to open defiance signals a major threat to elite power. Corporate profits may still rise, but the pressure from organized workers is rising even faster. That tension creates a storm that elites know could reshape labor relations for years to come, forcing them to either share prosperity or face growing resistance. Number 4, pandemic lessons. The COVID-19 pandemic reshaped how workers view their place in the economy, and the lessons learned during that crisis continue to fuel resistance today. At the height of the pandemic, society labeled millions of people as essential workers, praising them for keeping food on shelves, hospitals running, and packages delivered. Yet, despite the applause, many of those same workers were underpaid, overworked, and exposed to dangerous conditions without adequate protection. The contradiction between being called heroes and being treated as disposable left a lasting mark. Workers realized that while corporations could not function without them, those corporations often refused to provide even the most basic safeguards. That awakening planted the seeds of today's wave of labor activism. For countless employees, the pandemic served as a crash course in power dynamics. White-collar staff were often able to work from home safely, while service workers, nurses, delivery drivers, and warehouse staff faced daily risks. At the same time, many corporations saw their profits soar during lockdowns, especially in industries like e-commerce, pharmaceuticals, and technology. Workers asked themselves a hard question. If they were risking their lives to keep companies alive, why weren't they receiving fair compensation or lasting security in return? This realization drove a surge in unionization efforts at places like Amazon and Starbucks, where employees demanded not just better pay, but also respect and dignity. Research shows that traumatic experiences like the pandemic can act as catalysts for social change, and in this case, it gave workers both the clarity and courage to organize. Elites fear this shift because it represents a fundamental change in how workers view their own value. The pandemic taught people that they are not powerless cogs in a machine, but rather the backbone of the entire system. Social media amplified these lessons, spreading viral stories of unfair treatment, unsafe conditions, and corporate greed during a time of crisis. The collective memory of those sacrifices continues to drive demands for change today. Workers are no longer satisfied with temporary bonuses or symbolic gestures. They want structural improvements that guarantee safety, stability, and fair wages. For elites, this is frightening because it means workers have moved beyond short-term anger to long-term determination. The pandemic revealed the truth, and workers are refusing to forget it. Number 5, technology and automation. For decades, technology has been celebrated as a driver of progress. But for many workers, it also represents a looming threat. Automation, artificial intelligence, and advanced machinery have made businesses more efficient, but they have also fueled deep anxiety about job security. Workers in manufacturing, transportation, retail, and even white-collar professions have witnessed machines replacing tasks once performed by people. What makes this situation more frustrating is that while technology boosts productivity and corporate profits, the benefits rarely trickle down to employees. Instead of sharing gains through higher wages or reduced hours, companies often pocket the savings and push workers to do more with less. This imbalance creates a sense of injustice. If technology makes work faster and easier, why are workers still struggling to make ends meet? At the heart of the frustration is the question of fairness. Historically, periods of technological advancement came with both risks and rewards, but today's workers see the scales tipping heavily in favor of corporate executives and shareholders. A study by the Economic Policy Institute shows that while productivity has skyrocketed since the 1970s, wages have remained stagnant for the majority of workers. In other words, the machines are doing more, but people are not being compensated for the increased value they help generate. This disconnect drives a powerful demand. Workers want a fair share of the benefits brought by automation. They argue that technology should not only enrich a handful of executives, but should also improve the quality of life for those whose labor supports the system. Instead of job cuts and wage suppression, workers are calling for reduced hours, better pay, and stronger protections. What alarms elites is the growing determination of workers to demand control over how technology reshapes their lives. Employees are no longer passively accepting the narrative that automation is inevitable. They are organizing to influence how it is implemented. Debates over artificial intelligence in creative industries, self-checkout machines in retail, and robotics in warehouses all highlight this tension. Workers are beginning to push for policies that ensure automation benefits everyone, not just the top 1%. This movement threatens elites because it challenges their ability to unilaterally decide the future of labor. As technology continues to advance, so does the worker backlash, fueled by the belief that progress without fairness is nothing more than exploitation in disguise. Number 6, generational shifts. A powerful driver of today's worker pushback comes from younger generations who are reshaping attitudes toward work and fairness. Unlike their parents or grandparents, many young people are entering a labor market marked by crushing student debt, high housing costs, and limited job security. They quickly realize that the traditional promise, work hard, stay loyal, and you'll be rewarded, no longer holds true. This generation is far less willing to accept poor conditions or stagnant pay. Instead, they question why they should dedicate decades to companies that show little loyalty in return. Surveys reveal that millennials and Gen Z are more likely to support unions, strikes, and collective bargaining than older workers, signaling a cultural shift toward challenging authority and demanding equity. This generational change isn't happening in isolation. It's amplified by the way younger workers communicate and organize. Social media platforms like TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram have become digital gathering spaces where employees share wage data, expose unfair practices, and spread information about union campaigns. What might have once been hidden inside break rooms is now broadcast to millions in real time. This transparency builds solidarity solidarity across industries and borders, empowering younger workers to see themselves as part of a larger movement rather than isolated individuals. When a barista in New York posts about unsafe conditions or a warehouse worker in California shares their grueling hours, their stories resonate with people everywhere, sparking collective outrage and action. Elites are unsettled because this generational wave is not just temporary anger, it's a long-term cultural transformation. Younger workers are redefining success, prioritizing balance, fairness, and dignity over blind loyalty to corporations. They are more skeptical of corporate rhetoric and more willing to walk away from jobs that exploit them. The rise of the quiet quitting trend, alongside bold unionization drives, reflects a mindset that refuses to sacrifice personal well-being for corporate gain. This shift undermines the traditional power dynamic where elites relied on worker compliance and silence. Now they face a workforce that not only demands better treatment, but also has the tools, platforms, and collective spirit to fight for it. For elites, that's a frightening prospect because it means the future of labor is being rewritten by a generation unwilling to play by the old rules. Number 7. Global inspiration. Workers are not only looking at their own workplaces for motivation, they are drawing strength from movements around the world. When teachers in Chile march through the streets, when transportation workers in France shut down cities, or when farmers in India protest against unfair policies, these events echo far beyond national borders. Social media and global news coverage ensure that stories of resistance spread quickly, showing workers everywhere that they are not alone. This sense of shared struggle turns local frustration into global solidarity. If workers in one country can challenge elites and demand better conditions, others begin to believe they can achieve the same. Richard Wolff highlights that capitalism is a global system, and therefore resistance often grows stronger. When workers realize their fight is part of something much bigger than themselves, this global inspiration is more than symbolic. It provides practical lessons too. Workers learn strategies from one another, how to organize strikes, how to use digital platforms effectively, and how to maintain pressure on corporations that operate internationally. When dock workers in one region refuse to unload goods, it sends ripples through supply chains across continents, reminding everyone of the power labor holds, even in industries where union density has declined. The sight of successful mass actions abroad can spark renewed determination at home. For example, widespread strikes in France against pension reforms inspired conversations in the United States about retirement security and fair benefits. Global connections strengthen the belief that victories are possible, even in systems that feel overwhelmingly tilted toward elites. What makes elites nervous is that this inspiration erodes one of their traditional advantages: isolation. For decades, corporations and governments relied on keeping worker struggles fragmented and local. If a strike occurred in one city, it could be contained before spreading further. Now, with global communication and shared awareness, resistance is harder to suppress. Workers can coordinate across borders, support each other's campaigns, and expose exploitation in multinational companies. The message that an injury to one is an injury to all is no longer just a slogan. It's becoming a lived reality in a connected world. Elites fear this trend because it means workers are building not just national movements, but global ones, and that kind of solidarity has the potential to transform the balance of power on a scale not seen in generations.
Number 8.
corporate exploitation, exposed. For much of history, the harsh realities of corporate exploitation were hidden behind factory walls or office doors. Today, that secrecy is crumbling. Workers now have platforms to expose low wages, unsafe conditions, and abusive management practices to the world. A warehouse employee can post a video showing grueling shifts. A nurse can share images of overcrowded hospitals. A barista can detail the pressure of handling endless orders without breaks. These first-hand accounts cut through polished corporate advertising and reveal what life is truly like on the ground. Once invisible struggles are now impossible to ignore. And this exposure builds public sympathy for workers while damaging the credibility of elites who once controlled the narrative. Investigative journalism has also played a key role in uncovering the depth of exploitation. Reports have revealed companies using child labor in supply chains, misclassifying workers to avoid paying benefits, and lobbying to block wage increases despite soaring profits. When these stories break, they spark outrage not only among workers, but also among consumers who don't want to support exploitative practices. Research shows that transparency can drastically shift public opinion, and when communities side with workers, corporations lose one of their strongest weapons: silence. This external pressure emboldens employees, giving them confidence that their fight will not go unnoticed or unsupported. Each new revelation adds fuel to the growing fire of resistance. What unsettles elites is how quickly exposure can spiral into action. A single viral video can trigger boycotts, protests, or even government investigations. Once exploitation is out in the open, it becomes much harder for corporations to operate as usual without facing backlash. Workers understand this dynamic and are increasingly using exposure as a tool to gain leverage in negotiations and organizing campaigns. Social media has become a digital picket line where workers broadcast their struggles directly to millions, bypassing traditional gatekeepers. For elites, this represents a dangerous shift in power. Control over information no longer rests solely in their hands. Every story shared, every injustice revealed, chips away at their authority. As more workers step forward to shine light on exploitation, the ability of elites to hide behind corporate walls weakens, and the momentum for lasting change grows stronger.
Number 9.
Political polarization. Another reason workers are pushing back so forcefully is the sharp political polarization shaping today's world. For many people, economic struggles are no longer seen as isolated workplace issues, but as part of a bigger fight over democracy and power. Workers recognize that stagnant wages, weakened unions, and rising inequality are not just the result of market forces, they are the outcomes of political decisions. Laws around taxation, labor rights, health care, and education all shape how wealth and power are distributed. As these debates grow more intense, workers are realizing that their voices, if united, could shift the political balance. This realization worries elites, because it means labor disputes are no longer just about paychecks. They are about who holds influence in society. The connection between workplace struggles and politics has become increasingly clear in recent years. Movements for higher minimum wages, stronger union protections, and universal health care often overlap with broader political campaigns. Research shows that when workers organize, voter participation also also increases, which can dramatically reshape election outcomes. For example, strikes by teachers and healthcare workers not only highlight economic grievances, but also raise awareness about underfunded schools and hospitals. These actions spark community-wide discussions that spill into the political arena. Workers who once felt powerless are discovering that collective action in the workplace can translate into political power at the ballot box. This dual impact, economic and political, makes labor movements far more threatening to elites than simple wage demands. What alarms elites most is that polarization can erode their ability to control the narrative. In a divided environment, workers' stories of struggle gain traction with large audiences who see them as symbols of broader systemic injustice. Politicians who align with labor causes often gain momentum, while those defending corporate interests face growing criticism. The more polarized the climate becomes, the more likely it is that worker movements will attract political allies determined to challenge elite dominance. For elites, this represents a dangerous possibility, losing not only economic control, but also political influence. Workers are no longer content to be silent participants in a system designed from above. They are becoming active agents demanding change. Political polarization has turned workplace struggles into societal battles, and elites know that once workers wield both economic and political power, the balance of society could shift dramatically. Number 10. The power of collective action. Perhaps the most important reason elites are worried today is the rediscovery of collective action. Workers have always known that individually they hold limited power, but together they can bring entire industries to a halt. Recent years have shown this truth in action, from teachers shutting down school districts to delivery drivers delaying supply chains. Strikes and protests demonstrate how much leverage workers truly have. Victories like higher wages, improved benefits, and safer working conditions prove that standing together works. These successes ripple outward, inspiring others to organize and challenge employers who once seemed untouchable. The sight of ordinary people forcing billion-dollar companies to make concessions is not just symbolic, it's a direct challenge to elite authority. What makes this wave of collective action different from the past is how visible and contagious it has become. Social media broadcast picket lines, strike votes, and worker rallies in real time, allowing others to witness victories as they unfold. When nurses in one city win a contract, healthcare workers elsewhere take notice. When baristas at one coffee shop unionize, others are emboldened to follow. Research confirms that the success of one organizing effort increases the likelihood of more campaigns in related industries. This domino effect builds momentum, creating a culture of resistance that spreads faster than elites can contain. Workers are learning that collective action is not just a last resort. It is a proven strategy that delivers tangible results. Elites fear this momentum because it threatens to shift the balance of power permanently. If workers continue to build solidarity and achieve victories, the traditional dominance of corporations and wealthy executives will erode. Collective action transforms workplaces, but it also reshapes society by challenging the assumption that power rests solely with those at the top. Each strike, each protest, each successful negotiation sends a clear message. Workers are no longer willing to accept crumbs while others feast. For elites, this is deeply unsettling because it means their control is no longer longer guaranteed. The resurgence of collective action is not just about wages or hours. It is about dignity, fairness, and the right to shape the future. That is why elites are scared, and that is why workers are refusing to back down. Workers across the world are making it clear the old rules no longer apply. For too long, elites have relied on silence, fear, and division to maintain control. But rising inequality, skyrocketing living costs, and the visible contrast between corporate wealth and worker struggle have created a breaking point. Add to that the lessons of the pandemic, the challenges of automation, the energy of younger generations, and the inspiration of global movements. And you see why workers are standing taller than ever before. Every strike, every union vote, every protest adds another piece to a growing wave of resistance. What makes this moment historic is not just the anger, it's the units. Workers now know their value, and they've proven that collective action can deliver real victories. That knowledge spreads faster than fear, and it terrifies elites who thrive on keeping people divided and powerless. The battles unfolding today are not only about paychecks, but about reshaping society itself. They are about fairness, dignity, and the right to share in the prosperity workers help create. So the question is no longer whether workers will fight back. They already are. The real question is how far this movement will go, and how much it will transform the world we live in. If you believe these struggles matter, make sure to like this video, subscribe for more deep dives, and share your thoughts in the comments. Together we can keep this conversation alive and amplify the voices demanding change.